This week's episode is supported by IG. Are you in the market for more? IG's investment platform lets you do what you want when you want to. You can trade more than 13,000 shares and funds and get more out of your account with our range of resources, such as IG Academy courses, IGTV, and our expert analyst insights. They're all designed to help you be a better investor and give you the confidence to go after your financial goals. Find out more at ig.com/investing. Investing puts your capital at risk. It's the week ending Saturday, the 2nd of March, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen President Biden suggesting a ceasefire in Gaza is imminent. Speculation after Prince William dropped out of a memorial event for his godfather with just 45 minutes to go, and the death of Hairy Bikers star Dave Meyers at the age of 66. You can read all you need to know about everything that matters in The Week magazine, but we're here to bring you some stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Ollie Mann, and let's unwrap the week. And joining me today from the Week's digital team, we have Saoirse Bradley, we have podcaster and journalist Abdul Wahab Tahan, live from Hong Kong, and from somewhere up north, BBC Sports journalist Emma Smith. You in Salford today?
I am, yes. I'm in my closet in Salford.
Okay, I was going to say the background did not reveal location, so thank you for that very precise geotagging. Abdul, you're up first. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Is the measles outbreak infecting the headline?
Tonight, the highly infectious measles virus is spreading across more of the country, including in Florida, where a concerning outbreak is growing.
Right now, I'm not sending my 10-year-old to school.
There is definitely some concern about parents, about their kids being exposed and getting sick.
Officials in the Fort Lauderdale area are now reporting a 7th measles case within days.
Parents talking to NBC News outside a school in Fort Lauderdale, Florida last Saturday. Abdul, what were they talking about and what's happened this week?
So these concerned parents were talking about a measles outbreak in an elementary school in Florida, where this week 8 cases of measles have been linked to Broward County in Florida. This is worrying because the United States declared the disease eliminated in 2000. So the disease is making a comeback and it's highly contagious. A lot of kids who are not vaccinated will be contagious. And the CDC requirement, the Center for Disease Control, recommends isolating the patients. If your kid is unvaccinated, the CDC recommends isolating him or her for up to 21 days.
And why do we think, Saoirse, we're seeing an outbreak of measles in Florida?
Well, there's a number of reasons, partly because there has, of course, been a rise in vaccine skepticism in the US and across many countries in the world, including this one. And also, I think it's probably partly due to the lingering effects of the pandemic as well. I think that's not just in the US, again, in the UK as well. That's had an effect because it's been much more difficult for people to sort of access healthcare and go to routine appointments and ensure that their children are up to date with vaccinations. So it's a number of reasons.
And how are health officials dealing with the outbreak there, Emma?
So the response of the Florida Surgeon General, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, has been the source of some criticism as well. Generally, the established medical response to a case of measles is a 21-day quarantine for children. However, Dr. Ladapo has said that it is up to parental discretion whether to keep children at home at all, which has led to concern among parents, some of which we heard at the start of this section, saying that they're worried about sending their own children to school because of the risk that they might be receive the infection if a parent of a measles-infected child has decided that the child is well enough to go to school.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it, Abdul, because it's not just a case of, they're not invoking some emergency law to keep children at home. It's that they're not nudging parents to do so. They are, to quote his open letter, deferring to parents or guardians to make decisions about school attendance. It's almost a nudge in the opposite direction, like you choose, you see what happens, when we know that measles is so infectious.
Yeah, and that was completely a different message that Ohio followed in 2022. Well, what happened in 2002 in Ohio? Well, there was a measles outbreak with 85 cases. And most of them were toddlers, and around 42% of these toddlers needed to be hospitalized. So what did Ohio do? Well, they sent a message to parents with completely different wording and asking the unvaccinated kids to stay in isolated or to take one shot of MMR vaccine, which reduced the hours of kids had to be vaccinated to 72 hours only. And in around 3 months, they were able to eradicate measles from Ohio, which was incredible. But again, it was completely different wording. In the letter that was sent to the parents in Ohio, they knew they could not order people to vaccinate their kids, but the wording was very strong in kind of urging people to do that.
And Saoirse, the parents that are vaccine skeptical and don't want their children to have the MMR jab, I realise that the vast majority of medical professionals think this is all complete misinformation, but just so that we can give some insight into what their fears are, what are they worried might happen if their children have the MMR jab?
Yeah, so a lot of vaccine hesitancy has come from a now, I want to clarify and underline, totally discredited study by Andrew Wakefield, which was published in 1998. And he linked the MMR vaccine to autism. And now that is still the root of a lot of fears amongst parents today, that if their children are vaccinated, it could cause autism in their children. That study is totally discredited. It's been retracted from the journal it was published in. Wakefield has been struck off the General Medical Council register. But the effect of that study and that misinformation is still being felt widely around the world, in the UK, in the US, and globally today.
And I guess coupled, Emma, in Florida with the prevailing libertarian view, that's a troubling mix, isn't it? Because it's not just that there are rumours around, even if they've been discredited, about what might happen if you take the vaccine. It's also that people don't like doing what their government is mandating them to do. So the government doesn't do as much mandating of it, and people express that right more clearly and firmly.
Yes, I don't think there's a huge amount of surprise that this outbreak is happening in Florida, which is governed by Ron DeSantis and his very famously anti-government intervention, like I say, libertarianism. I guess they would describe it as anti-woke kind of government position. But it is part of a prevailing trend across much of the US. The number of vaccine exemptions in the US is at an all-time high. 3% of kindergarten-aged children in 2022-23 had official vaccine exemptions, and that's, and there might be many more which are unregistered. Obviously, that's a significant minority of children which aren't vaccinated, but it's a growing number, and it only takes a very small, number like that to allow a outbreak such as this measles outbreak that we are seeing in Florida. So it's obviously something it's not a huge widespread, epidemic such as COVID, but it is worrying, particularly as it is a disease like measles, which is so, dangerous, particularly for unvaccinated children.
And actually, because of the success, Abdul, of vaccination programs, the collective memory of what it's like when generations of children have measles has gone. There isn't anyone around to tell us how awful it was.
You're absolutely right, because it's kind of eradicated. So for a herd immunity to work, about 95% of the population needs to be vaccinated. By 2019, just before COVID, the rate of kids around the world vaccinated was estimated to be 86%. So we're not there yet, but some countries have declared it over, like the United States. But it's kind of making a comeback, and that's because of during COVID, a lot of people missed their appointments. They couldn't take their vaccine because of other issues. But measles is actually more contagious than COVID itself. It's 5 to 10 times more contagious, and it travels long distance. So if you're unvaccinated, you're most likely to catch it, and the consequences are really could lead to hearing loss and pneumonia or syphilitis.
And also, I suppose, Saoirse, the vaccine isn't 100% effective, is it? So, I mean, the more people there are around with measles, the more likely that those of us who are vaccinated will be exposed to it and might still develop it.
Yeah, exactly. It is extremely, extremely effective. I think it's something like 97% effective. But of course, there will always be some people who can't take the vaccine because they're allergic. There are children who will be too young to take the vaccine. And in order for us to have sort of herd immunity coverage, 95% of the population needs to be vaccinated. So if, it only takes a relatively small percentage of children and people to not be vaccinated for that risk to sort of spread to those people who can't be vaccinated for very legitimate reasons.
And also, lest we think this is just an issue in America, as you alluded to earlier, this is in the UK as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In the UK, coverage for children by the age of 5 is now at just below 86%. So we're below the level needed to protect all people from measles, mumps and rubella. And, this has come partly because of, disruptions caused by the pandemic, where certain age groups have missed out on routine childhood immunizations. But the UK's approach is quite different. It's taking a very proactive approach. It's setting up...
You get sent a letter with an appointment on it. I presume you can opt out, but it's like your child is coming on Thursday, the 5th of September at 11 o'clock.
Exactly. Exactly. And actually recently the NHS has launched a new campaign to sort of prompt, parents to get their children vaccinated. And particularly in London, certain parts of London, there are very, very low vaccination rates. And pop-up clinics are being set up in London schools to ensure, for whatever reason, because it isn't just, vaccine hesitancy. There can be very real barriers to access to, medical care. If healthcare professionals can go into schools and say, we're here, let's do this, then, that removes, some of the barriers in getting children vaccinated.
Abdul, you've chosen this story as your story of the week. Do you have concerns for this globally?
I don't have concerns for this globally, but the reason why I have chosen it, because it reminded me of how we got vaccinated in Syria. It's completely different. In Syria, parents don't take children to hospital or to clinics. The hospital comes to the school, and class by class, we all line up and we go down and get the vaccine. Most parents don't even know what vaccine you took. Nobody pretty much cares. They come, they give you the vaccine, and then they give you some candy, and that's it. And I remember I did not get my candy from one of the vaccines. So I was really a bit upset about it.
Yeah, I mean, in a strange sort of way, Emma, knowing less about what your children are having, as Abdul's suggesting, when it was just the default thing, and of course this was the case in the USA as well, children were vaccinated at school, didn't know what it was, just trusted the state to give them the right thing. Weirdly, when parents were less informed, people were more protected.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not so much a case of less informed, but sort of more protected from misinformation. I mean, we're seeing a rise in anti-vax sentiment, vaccine hesitancy, or whatever you want to call it. It's no surprise that that's coinciding with, the rise of social media, everyone being connected on Facebook or whatever, which allows bad actors to sort of post, do you know what's in these vaccines? Do you know what they're putting in your children? And, there's no surprise that sort of this vaccine hesitancy has come at a time in which there is more access to information. People don't necessarily know where to go for the right information. And the stats around the dangers of measles are incredibly clear, that unvaccinated people have a 90% chance of infection if exposed to measles. And that, measles has a very high rate of causing death or life-changing disabilities if a child is infected by it and it has not got a vaccination. But it's sort of the double-edged sword of information on social media. People have access to information. Theory would have much better informed. In a way, as you say, Ollie, it was almost better when there was less knowledge going around.
That's what we're all about on this Current Affairs podcast. Less knowledge. Emma, I'll be coming back to you for your story of the week after this. This week's episode is supported by IG. Are you in the market for more? IG's investment platform lets you do what you want when you want to. You can trade more than 13,000 shares and funds and get more out of your account with our range of resources, such as IG Academy courses, IGTV, and our expert analyst insights. They're all designed to help you be a better investor and give you the confidence to go after your financial goals. Find out more at ig.com/investing. Investing puts your capital at risk. Okay, Emma, your turn. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
At last, is motorsport finally for girls?
When I started, there was no female drivers competing in Formula One to watch at the weekends. There still aren't. And for that reason, a lot of people won't believe that they can be Formula One drivers or compete at the highest level. So why should they start in the sport in the first place? But it's opening their eyes, giving them the opportunity to progress and have that chance. But also, I think, when I started as well, I was the only girl going to karting events, and I was lucky enough to have my brother with me, and that made it easier and made the transition, not so intimidating.
Racing driver Jamie Chadwick speaking to Sky News on Friday last week. So what's been happening this week, Emma?
Well, this week, as most sport fans will know, the new Formula One season starts in Bahrain. As when this podcast is available to listen to on Friday, the practice sessions will be well underway ahead of qualifying and then the race on Sunday. Why is this newsworthy? Well, it's the 32nd consecutive year in which there will be no female entries into F1. In fact, only 5 women have ever raced in Formula One, and the last to even qualify for a race or score points was Lella Lombardi in 1976. So it's been quite a long time since any women competed in Formula One, which, given that motorsport in theory should be a sport in which men and women are more able to compete on an even footing, is quite shocking.
And so Jamie Chadwick's been launching a new series to try and combat this.
Yes, so several attempts have been made to rectify the lack of women at the top of motorsport, including Jamie Chadwick, who we heard there. For those who don't know, Jamie is a British driver from Bath. She's one of the world's most successful, currently active female racing drivers. She races for the Williams, a team in the F1 Academy Series. She won the now defunct female-only W Series 3 times. And she has now launched the self-named Jamie Chadwick series to give women an opportunity in karting, which is often a path through which professional motor racers cut their teeth. But she said in an interview, even despite her success, she said in an interview with BBC Sport on Monday this week that she still regularly faces sexism and insults about her gender within the world of motorsport and on social media and things like that.
It's going to be a long old path, though, isn't it, Saoirse? I mean, even if the logic is right that more female drivers in karting means more female drivers in, for example, Formula 3, you've still got a long way to go before you get a female racing driver in Formula 1.
Yeah, I sort of have mixed feelings about, setting up a women's competition because, as Emma was saying, in theory, there's no real reason why women cannot compete along men in, the top tiers of motorsports in F1, give or take a few sort of technical issues being sort of smoothed out or overcome. So, I find it, it's really sad that, it's kind of come to the point where, we're setting up women's competitions in order to give women any space at all in the sport. But then again, I look at sort of women's football and how successful that's been in the last few years. And I love to go see Arsenal WFC on the weekends. They're breaking records. So there clearly is sort of this thirst and this need amongst not just amongst women fans, but all fans, to see more women at the top echelons of all these sports, all these incredibly popular sports. So if this is one way that women can get more visibility in the sport, then I think that's great. And if it gives more sort of younger female drivers role models and people looked up to and sort of can see the paths that, they can take and can kind of emulate that. So, slowly we get more women into F1, then I think, that's great. So I think it's kind of I have mixed feelings about it.
Is there an appetite, do you suspect, Abdul, amongst the existing fans of Formula One and motor racing to see more women drivers? Because they've been attracted to the sport as it is, where it's all men.
I'm one of those F1 fans, and I watch the qualifying in every race. And to be honest with you, if I can speak from my experience, I'm a little bit indifferent, and I support having separate categories because I still think that men physique help them in the race. Like, you look at the F1 driver, they lose around 2 to 3 liters of water. So how much water do you need? There's a lot of tension on your muscles and with the G-force. So the male physique plays a role in here, and the transformation of your body in order to be able to drive an F1 car. And the acceleration G-force is comparable to the G-force astronaut go through when they go to the moon or into space. So it's not an easy sport. So having separate category for women, I would definitely watch it. If you put a woman in an F1's car, I would definitely watch it. To be honest with you, not I'm watching it because there's a woman in it, but because it's an F1. It's the car. It's just like if you like diving, it doesn't matter. You would watch women divers or men divers. You like the sport itself.
Is there a hesitancy, though, Abdul, amongst some fans, do you think? Sort of a bit like, I don't know, the sort of early 20th century approach to female wrestling, of just like, because there's this element of danger in Formula One, you know, you're watching it partly that you hope that there's going to be excitement on the track, but you hope that no one's horribly injured in a crash. But the fact that someone could be horribly injured in a crash makes it exciting. I wonder whether some male fans would feel uncomfortable putting women in that situation.
I don't think men will be considerate about the well-being of the drivers because, I don't know, they go to watch them. But I've never been to a Grand Prix before because it's very, very expensive to go there. But I've been to other sports. But when I look at the paddock and I watch every race, you see the majority are men. The majority of fans are men. But again, I don't suppose that it matters because I understand Sorcha talked about visibility in sports, and I don't know, driving is the least visible. So you wouldn't be able to distinguish a man from a woman driving, really, because they're wearing their helmet and they're behind a wheel. I wouldn't be able to distinguish the car if it's, for example, if it's Hamilton or Russell when they're using the same car. I would only know the difference because of the color they're using and the numbers. That's it. But it's the same identical car.
Emma, are there differences in the way that men and women drive?
What you mean outside of making jokes about parking and things like that?
Yes, please.
I mean, potentially the big issue, the reason why I can't really give particularly straightforward answer to that is because there's extremely limited data on female elite motorsport. A report last year by More Than Equal, which is an organisation co-founded by the former Formula One driver David Coulthard, found that just 13% of participants in karting are female, and that drops to 7% in more elite categories such as Formula and GT racing. It also discovered that there is no global participation data for women in motorsport. So in terms of answering exactly how different there are in terms of this driving style, driving speeds of elite male and female racers, really we're lacking in sort of like unified data. It's almost got to all be anecdotal. And if you're having a much fewer number of female drivers at the very top level, you're going to get a much smaller data size, and it's going to be much more open to, preconceived notions of, well, men are naturally stronger, quicker, therefore will be faster, and therefore will dominate in motorsport. I mean, doing some reading around this, it was quite interesting. One of the few very successful women in mixed gender motorsport is Danica Patrick, who competed in US racing, NASCAR and IndyCar for more than a decade. And she had limited success, won very few races, faced some criticism on that. She also faced accusations that she had an unfair advantage because she was smaller and lighter than many of her male competitors. And so therefore there were accusations that she had an advantage because, she was carrying less weight in her car, which sounds absolute, which I mean was dismissed. It seems very unlikely that did have an impact, but it does show how, but in a lot of these cases, when we're sort of bumping in the dark because there isn't enough data, which as any F1 fan would tell you, is quite astonishing because F1 is basically all data.
Yeah. I mean, some data that there is, Saoirse, that I found which was fascinating was a university study into jockeys, which said that when it comes to horse racing, male jockeys have no more influence over the performance of a racehorse than female jockeys. They looked into it academically. That is what they have evidenced. And yet 90% of jockeys are male.
Yeah, I mean, I think, F1, men and women are allowed to compete in F1 alongside the men, as is also true in horse racing. And I think, if F1 says, women can be here and compete on the same level, then they need to be making sure that those women are actually getting there and finding ways that they can actually get there. And, I actually, when I was looking at this, I think one of the really interesting things that's sort of preventing women from getting to the top levels is this issue over power steering. And in sort of the lower levels, their cars don't use power steering. So it's very difficult for, just in terms of brute strength, it's harder for women to drive the cars in lower levels. And then in F1, there is power steering, which makes, obviously you still have a lot of G-force acting on you, but it makes it a bit easier. So actually, we just don't know, to what sort of top level women would be able to compete in F1 cars, because those cars are, different from the F2 and F3 cars. I'm not saying they're easier to drive, because clearly they're not, but there is this sort of big barrier in terms of steering. So that's sort of looked upon, if we can sort of solve that issue, then maybe lots more women will get through to F1 and, won't drop out at sort of the lower levels as they are doing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Abdul, as an F1 fan, would you like to see Formula One, the brand, the organisation, doing more to support women at the lower levels to get into the industry in the first place?
If that's going to create a different category for women, yes, why not? That would mean more races for me. I would watch more races. I mean, if they create a series where they put a raccoon in the driver's seat in an F1, I would watch it. It doesn't really matter for me. Again, I think me and my friends, we always watch races because we love races. I mean, they're creating more races. Now there's drag races that they trialed last year, and they're going to introduce them again this year. More racing time, it means more people watching. So if there's more races where they allow women and they support women. Lewis Hamilton has now an initiative to bring more black drivers into F1 because he's currently the only black drivers. So it's also good. It's good for diversity. Let's see more people, more races. That's what I really care about.
Yeah, I mean, just finally on that, Emma, it's an interesting comparison that, isn't it? Because, yes, obviously you can only have more black drivers by starting by having one. But look at the flack that Lewis Hamilton has had to endure as a result of his ethnic identity. Whichever woman does finally get back into Formula One as the first female driver in 5 decades, they're going to have to put up with a lot of stick, aren't they?
Yes, they're going to have to put up with a lot of attention, certainly. I mean, Lewis Hamilton had a lot of attention when he first raced in F1 back in 2006 as the first step driver in Formula One. And, whoever becomes the first female driver in one race will probably be getting on for 50 years by the time that a female driver does race in a full F1 race. There will be a huge amount of focus. I think that there are a lot of good initiatives going on to try and both make motor racing more accessible for women and also to try and normalise it. So, for example, this Jamie Chadwick series is to offer free karting for girls over the age of 8 at some UK racetracks. So to remove the cost barrier, which Lewis Hamilton has also spoken about being a barrier for different classes and ethnicities of people. There are also things like the F1 Academy, which was established last year, which is an all-female series, which maiden F1 teams have nominated drivers in the competition for this year, such as Chadwick, who races under the Williams banner. So it is about sort of normalising and creating more openings. And I mean, in April last year, the managing director of F1 Academy, Susie Wolf, said that the aim is they are 8 to 10 years from having a woman in F1. So it's obviously, even at the most optimistic estimates, some years away from happening. But there are plenty of, initiatives and work being done to try and rectify this. So there is definitely reasons to be encouraged.
Okay, one to keep an eye on. Saoirse, you're up next after this. Saoirse, it's over to you. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Is this the day the music died, at least on the world's most popular social media app?
In this world, it's just us. It's not the same as it was in this world.
Bit of Harry Styles there, always worth it. But why are we listening? Well, because that song, As It Was co-written by Styles, who isn't signed to Universal Records, Saoirse, but co-written alongside the producers Kid Harpoon and Tyler Johnson, who are represented by Universal Records. This all sounds very granular, but it's relevant to this week's news. Why?
Yes, so there's been this intense battle over royalties going on between the world's largest music group, which is Universal Music Group, and TikTok. But that has intensified this week as songs published by UMG began to be removed from the platform. And the fight has escalated even further because Universal has gone for what industry insiders are saying is the nuclear option, which is to require TikTok to take down any songs on which a songwriter from Universal's publishing division has been credited. So, that basically means that any recording, even if it's not by a UMG artist or on a UMG label, if a songwriter from UMG has collaborated on that song, then that song will have to come down or be muted. So that could potentially affect a huge number of the songs that are popular on TikTok. TikTok said that up to 30% of its most popular songs could be lost from the app. But other industry experts say that it actually could be 80% of all music on TikTok, which is a huge problem for the app because the majority, I think it's something like 85% of its content, uses music. And it's a huge platform for emerging artists, not just emerging artists, all music artists, to sort of tease and release their new songs, to promote their new music. And, for the app itself, music is a big part of its content creation.
Okay. Remind us, Abdul, why Universal have withdrawn their music in the first place.
Well, Universal had withdrawn because they could not agree on the fee to renew their lease and their agreement. And that's partly the reason. But the TikTok, while there's always, I think, 1 billion users all over the world, it's not the biggest. The biggest, I think, is so far is Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok. As you know, TikTok is a Chinese app, and so the Chinese version is called Douyin. And most of the revenues in Douyin does not come really from music. It's a little bit completely different, and it comes from live streaming. And if you look at Douyin and TikTok, they're a little bit different because in Douyin you can pay money for people live streaming and for artists. And I don't think the Chinese artists and singers are part of Universal Music. So I don't think the majority will be affected, but the majority in the West, like in the UK and the US, will be affected because they could not agree on a fee to pay to renew these music. Because Universal Music has a category of 3 million songs, which is crazy.
Yes, I mean, they are one of what is called the three majors, aren't they, Emma? The others being, Warner and Sony, I believe.
Yeah.
So, you've got these three record labels that have the majority of Western pop music on them, which means that this row that otherwise would be, for the music industry press, pretty niche really, is now something that fans are very aware of.
Absolutely. I mean, you only need to look at how sort of ubiquitous music is on TikTok, much more so than any other social media platform. Almost every TikTok video has some sort of music on it. If it's something that's been created, like a dance video or something like that, and so there's going to be a huge number of content creators affected. And I mean, and the sheer number of songs that have gone viral through TikTok. For example, one of the most recent examples is "On the Dance Floor," which went viral after the release of the film Saltburn, which I hugely appreciated. Being a child of the early 2000s, hearing Sophie Ellis-Bextor in the charts again was wonderful. But for example, Murder on the Dance Floor is a universal song. And so if every video which had Murder on the Dance Floor in it is going to be muted or, taking that copyright struck, basically not being allowed on the app anymore. And so you get a feeling of just how many videos and how many people are going to be affected on TikTok by this.
But it's actually necessary, isn't it, Sorcha, for these two giants to have this battle? I mean, you sort of almost need a music catalogue owner as large as Universal to have it, because no one's going to speak up, if they're an unsigned artist about their copyright.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, this is part of Universal's argument. It said in a statement that ultimately TikTok is trying to create a music-based business without paying fair value for the music. That's a big part of its argument. And, Universal is saying that it wants fair compensation for its music and it wants fair compensation for its artists. I mean, TikTok obviously doesn't agree. But, TikTok has enjoyed favorable music licensing agreements for a while as it acquired Musical.ly. And basically, Universal is saying, you're benefiting from, our business, our songs, and we want a fair deal now. Of course, not all Universal artists are happy with this arrangement. Because, for smaller artists in particular, TikTok is a huge platform for promoting their music, and lots of artists have built their following. And if they can't, now they can't play their own, music that they created on the main platform they used to promote their work. But then, other artists are saying, if this is, a way then that we can be fairly compensated, and other artists, not just at, Universal, but it might force renegotiation with other labels.
I mean, it's a delicate line to walk, isn't it, Abdul? Because at some point, one side or the other is going to back down. Either TikTok is going to give Universal more money, or Universal is going to allow its music back on there for less money than they wanted. I mean, that's how these trade disputes ultimately resolve.
That's true, but how much money do you want? I mean, allegedly, TikTok pays $110 million a year to Universal Group, but Universal says it's only 1% of its annual revenue, so they wanted more than that. So how much money do you want to get? And as you said, if TikTok designers and are not stupid people, they created an app that is now most downloaded, more than it surpassed Facebook. It's the number one downloaded app worldwide. So I'm sure they have data that we don't have access to, and I'm sure that they know what's best for them. So if they think that paying more money or not paying more money is going to work better for them, I'm sure they have the data to back it up. Just like F1, they have more data than we do, and I'm sure they make the best decisions for their business.
What does this say about the future of the music industry as it intersects with tech, though, Emma? Because there was a moment kind of 5-6 years ago, I'm thinking about Spotify, finally proving that it was possible to sell legal streaming, for example. People was like, oh, well, we don't need peer-to-peer anymore. People, Napster, all the phantom of that's gone. There's still going to be money in the music industry eventually. We just need to get more people signed up. It feels like musicians are still saying, but I'm not able to pay my rent.
Yeah, I think this is a very much another case of the music industry having to very rapidly catch up how the changing way in which people listen to music. Obviously, Universal have clearly decided to take a stand when they've looked at the books and realised that, according to reports, TikTok accounts for just 1% of Universal's revenue, despite the impact, the popularity and the sheer amount of music which is on TikTok. It's very much a case of the music industry having to play catch up, and artists themselves having to sort of play the game and they're almost having to take sides. I mean, there's a BBC interview this week with artists who had success on TikTok, had songs that have gone viral on TikTok, and there's a variety of opinions. Cody Fry said that it felt like being stuck between two colliding planets in terms of split loyalties between record label and this social media platform. Kim Petras, who's had a number one in the last year, on the other hand, praised Universal for taking a stand and saying they felt protected by their stance in fighting for their artists. I think certainly in terms of record labels realizing how their audience is changing and how it consumes their music, they're certainly having to adapt, and also, of course, adapting in a way which ensures that they get what they perceive as their rightful payment for this music.
Or, Saoirse, will users on TikTok just find other music to stream? And actually, it'll be annoying to them their favourite artists aren't there, but actually, as long as the other record labels are, life will carry on.
Yeah, and actually what is happening, I think TikTok has said that it hasn't seen a decline in engagement or lost users since Universal removed its catalogue. And actually, really interestingly, Universal said that streaming of its artists' music globally increased after it started to withdraw music. So actually, maybe in some sense, this could end up, being a win for both apps. TikTok so far doesn't seem to be particularly losing out. Universal seems to be, winning. Yeah, and I think, people always will find ways to sort of work, if artists really want to put their music on the internet and on different platforms, they will find ways and they'll find workarounds.
Emma, you're the person who introduced me to Lo-Fi Girl on this very podcast. Is there an artist that you've discovered through streaming recently?
Honestly, no. To be honest, I've only just started listening to Bob Marley's music because I saw the Bob Marley movie the other day.
Yeah. Abdul, have you discovered anyone through streaming?
Surprisingly, I don't have TikTok or Douyin or use Instagram or any short form video platform. That's why I'm so happy with life.
Well, we're so plugged in. Saoirse, please give me at least a recommendation that you found through your TikTok research.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't have TikTok.
Oh my God.
I had to delete it because it was so addicting. But I deleted it about 2 years ago, so
I applaud that
can't
decision.
actually. Yeah.
I did discover Conan Gray through TikTok, but that was about 2 years ago, along with everyone else. Anyway, my thanks to Saoirse, Abdul, and Emma. You can follow this show for free and get every episode as soon as it's released. Just search for The Week Unwrapped wherever you get your podcasts, and tap follow. You can also get 6 free issues of The Week magazine with a trial subscription when you go to theweek.co.uk/subscribe. In the meantime, I've been Ollie Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer, Ollie Peart at Rethink Audio. And until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye.